Thanks everyone for tuning in to check out our podcast today, Maker Connect. My name is Matt Despins and I'll be your host for the show. With me today, we have Andrew Yoshikawa. Andrew is currently Chief Revenue Officer at Infogen Labs. We're definitely looking forward to having you on the show, Andrew. And to get us started, let's start by hearing an overview about your career and your current projects so the listeners can get just a sense about your negotiations and business experience. So with that, kind sir, I will turn it over to you to kind of chat about yourself a little bit.
All right. Well, I guess I'll start off with the beginning and the fact that I am 100% that awful cliche when it comes to sales. My first sales gig was as a used car salesman.
This podcast is over. It's over.
So yeah, that's where I cut my teeth. That's where I got my feet wet, was selling used cars for Enterprise. A lot of people know them as a rental car company.
Yep.
They sell cars as well. And that's what I did. I sold used cars. It was a great training ground, learned a lot. When you talk about negotiation, to me, like when I think negotiation, really it comes down to alignment. I think about alignment. And I think, do the features and the benefits that I'm offering align to the need that a customer has? And if they do, negotiation it's almost superfluous. It's not even necessarily necessary because the value speaks for itself. It's there. There's, you and your customer, you're aligned. Learned that there at Enterprise, and selling used cars. Eventually, right as the market started to crash, which was an interesting thing too. You ever want to see how the economy's doing? Watch car sales.
Yep. Agreed.
I was in what we call the box at the time, actually doing finance. So I'd worked my way up from being a used car salesman to being the guy that does all the financing for the used cars.
Yep.
And I was working with all my subprime lenders, and all of a sudden, every single one of them was turning all my subprime paper down. And this was about 8-9 months before the crash in 2008.
Okay.
And so I'm watching this going, well, wait a second, you're a subprime lender. Why are you asking for A paper? That's not our relationship. That's not what I go to you for.
That's not what we do here. Yeah.
This is what's going on. No. We have too much risk. Can you give me an A paper here? And then I'll take 2, subprime. I'm like, no, you can take 3 subprime. That's my A paper goes over here. And then, so I was at the forefront watching as 2008 hit. As 2008 hit, I went into lead gen sales in the automotive industry. So worked for a company called automotive.com.
Okay.
They were owned by a publishing house that does I think it's over like 90 different specialty publishing magazines, several of them in the automotive industry. And we would, generate leads through our websites, through our articles and things like that, and then sell those to dealerships. So kind of playing off of the experience I had in the automotive industry, and then branching off into a new type of sales, selling lead gen services. After that, did a stint in staffing.
Okay.
Worked for one of the most well-known staffing organizations in the U.S. and around the globe, quite frankly. Amazing training ground. I mean, I learned a lot. You think of some of those sales movie staples out there, that boiler room mentality, the what have you done for me lately? Constantly being, go. Like I couldn't make it through the day without 5-6 cups of coffee.
Yeah, no, that's a rough industry. I actually know a little bit about that, and what you're saying is correct.
So did that for a stint until I was about ready to break.
Yeah.
Luckily, had made some great relationships with fellow employees at the time that had also moved on, and then had an opportunity to jump from selling staffing services to getting into technology consulting. I'm a huge technologist. I love technology. I cannot tell you how excited I am in the world today. All the books that I grew up reading, the science fiction, the steampunk, the cyberpunk, William Gibson. I mean, it's all coming true. And, minus the dystopian aspects of it, I couldn't be more happy, because this is all the stuff that I just filled my head daydreaming about, as a young kid into adulthood. And so, made that transition into technology consulting sales, and have been there ever since. Stayed about 10 years, 11 years with that technology consulting company before eventually making a move to Infogen Labs. And, when I look at sales careers too, when I look at my peers, when I look at some of my colleagues that I've worked with over the years, even in hiring practices, I see it all the time, right? You've got sales professionals, they'll stay with a company 1, 2 years, usually 2, maybe 4 years if you're lucky, and then they jump ship, they leave, they go somewhere else. I would say that was my plan at my previous organization. I was successful. We'll just leave it at that.
Yep.
Which made leaving really hard because you want to find that next great opportunity, not just
Sure.
any opportunity. And I found that next great opportunity here at Infogen Labs. I mean, people talk about owning a forever home. I found my forever job. This is where I want to hang my hat. I don't see myself ever leaving. I hope that nothing happens that would force me into a position where I'd have to leave because, again, found my forever company here. Again, leveraging my past experience in technology consulting, taking it here with me at Infogen Labs. And, now I'm in a position where I've got the opportunity to kind of take what I've learned over my 20 years of sales and, help train that next generation of sales individuals. And, I know a lot of people get into sales because they think it's a quick win. It's a great way to make money and to make money fast. If that's your thought process, I'm going to tell you right now, maybe in the short term it'll be like that, but really, sales is not a sprint. It is 100% a marathon. It's taken me years to recognize and realize that. But in that realization, it has allowed me to get to where I am now. Relationships that you start in your early 20s are relationships that will carry fruit on into your late 40s, your 50s, your 60s. Because think about it, as you're starting off on your career and you're building relationships with individuals that are also starting off on their career, or maybe might be a little bit higher in their career than you because they're decision makers, and you're sitting there hitting the phones and doing all that, hunting activity. As you progress in your career, so will they. And as they gain more and more decision-making ability, if you maintain those relationships, regardless of the company you're at, regardless of the industry you're in, regardless of whether or not they even have a need for what you're offering, but you maintain those relationships, they will pay dividends year over year over year. And as you add to that book of relationships, that opportunity to grow and to grow quicker and quicker and bigger and larger, just it's an exponential growth. So I would say one thing I've learned out of this crazy career track, starting with selling used cars to today as a newly minted chief revenue officer who's still trying to understand what that really means and the roles, the responsibilities, the knowledge set, the skills, identifying the gaps there. It's that sales is not a sprint. It is 100% a marathon. Just to kind of give a picture into my head and how I kind of see sales and all of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, this podcast, we frequently interchange sales and negotiations because they are so closely related, and we have so many CROs on. So I love that you can shed light on both of those. You said so many fascinating things there. So let me touch on these one at a time. Truly, I wrote all kinds of stuff down while you're talking. So first off, I hate that used car salespeople get a bad rep. People got to drive cars. You know what I'm saying? People got to drive cars, and so I think that that's a really misunderstood area of expertise. I think it's very difficult to try to sell a car. And I do want to talk about, in a minute, I want to talk about the negotiations that happen at your CRO level now versus that. But staffing industry, I know many people who have that is 100% a grind. It's the Glengarry, Glenn Ross type scenario. You know what I mean? It's it's that all day long. ABC always be closing. And I finally want to say, because we do talk a little bit about AI too. I love your passion for technology. I just want to close this part by saying that it's so your perspective on it, Andrew, the fact that you're now sitting here as a successful CRO at Infogen and able to have the humility to reflect back and say, not only am I grateful for my career and my hard work, but also all those things I dreamed about as a kid, here they are right now, and I'm happy about that. So that's some truly unique perspective. You don't see that kind of often. So let's actually dive in for a minute and talk about those differences. So correct me if I'm wrong, but at
Hmm.
Infogen and
Hmm.
some of your other roles, you've been able to see negotiations at a pretty high level, right? Pretty high
Oh,
dollar.
absolutely.
Yeah, pretty high dollar amount.
Absolutely.
When you were selling used cars back then in what, a 2006 ish, right? I mean, it wouldn't be
Yeah,
uncommon to get a used.
2005, 2008. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could probably get a used car back then. You could get a decent one for 15,000, not anymore. What are what are some of the key differences when you think about a multi-million dollar negotiation versus a $15,000 negotiation? How might you approach those differently? And what thoughts do you have about strategy wise on those two?
So I'm gonna break that question. I
Sure,
wouldn't
please
think
do.
about them differently at all.
Okay.
Really, I wouldn't. If I was to point out a major difference between the two, it's the stress and anxiety you put on yourself as an individual.
Mm.
If you're confident in the product or the service that you're selling, whether it's $10 watch bands, or whether it's a $10 million, 5 year, integration project, complete with data migration, you know, it doesn't matter if you're confident in the product or the service that you're offering to the customer in front of you, and you know that what you're offering is going to make a difference in a
Hmm.
positive way for them. The only difference is the stress you put on yourself. And I would almost say that stress actually doesn't even change too, because when I was selling used cars
Mm.
for $15,000 a used car, I was fresh out of college. I didn't have a care in the world, but at the same time, it's like, you got to live, you got to eat, you want to have, a little bit of money for fun. And so every single time I sat down to that negotiation table, my livelihood was on the line. You know, my lifestyle has grown a bit over the years. I've got a family now. I've got mouths to feed. The stakes, if you look back, you're going to, or I should say, if you're forward thinking, you look at that and you go, wow, those stakes are so much higher. But at the time, the stakes I was faced with selling used cars felt just as big as the stakes I'm faced with today, feeding a family of five, and trying to hit the revenue targets that we at Infogen want to hit, and the growth targets we want to hit. The stakes feel the same. I know from an intellectual level, the stakes are completely different. But being that young kid, fresh out of college, selling used cars, then I didn't know that, and it felt just as stressful. The anxiety was just as strong. The uncomfortability was there, and that's another thing I'd say about negotiations and sales. Learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You'll do your best work in those moments, and it's the only way you grow. Um, I've been blessed in that I stand on the shoulders of giants. I have met unbelievable sales professionals throughout my career, and I've taken something from each one of those individuals that have gotten me to where I am today. I had a boss at Enterprise. He was a regional VP, selling used cars, and we did a training session with him one day, and he said, "Look, when you work within this circle here, this is your level of comfort. You're never going to grow. You're never going to hit the money you want to hit. You're never going to leave this circle. What you need to do every day is challenge yourself to live outside of that circle. And then when this outside area becomes your circle, live outside of that, and you'll just grow and grow and grow." So I actually like nowadays being in negotiations that make me uncomfortable, not knowing what the outcome is, being forced to uncover something new, a hidden pain I didn't account for, or a hidden variable. Maybe it's I thought I was talking to the right decision maker, only to find out at the 11th hour that it was actually two or maybe even three decision makers that I needed to be talking to. I've been negotiating with one, and we're all buttoned up tight, but I never accounted for these two over here. Okay, well, what are the new variables I need to account for in this negotiation? How do I maintain, right, what I'm doing? And the goals and the targets that I have, but account for these new variables that have just out of nowhere kind of hit the scene. You grow the fastest and move the farthest, and you feel the most success when you get through those gauntlets.
Yeah, it's the being able to pivot, and I love your call out there. Obviously, there's a lot of motivational speakers who talk about that. David Goggins, Gary Vaynerchuk, about being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And I love how you said that, Andrew. And I think that one of the other parts that I've realized in life too is that it's not just like, well, go outside your comfort zone to grow. Okay, fair. But I think just like gravity, I think there's like other forces in life here. Don't know what they are, but it's like when you go through something, when you force yourself through a moment of discomfort, it's almost like in some ways life rewards you and just says, okay, here's more progress, right? Because you did it.
Yep.
So it's something more than just going past comfort. I think stars and whatever align and they're like, okay, cool. Like you've punched your ticket. Here's your next reward. Let's do it
Yep.
again. Right. I love
Yep.
that. And you also touched on something about the perceptions in general, but value.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is you said you felt the same amount of stress when you were selling that used car as you do enterprise
Today.
solutions.
Yep.
And I love that. I haven't heard that yet here in this podcast, but that's so true because the perception when you're 21, that's your world at that moment, right?
100%.
That's your, I hadn't thought about that. That's your world. Now this is your world. Both carry equal pressure, but at the time it felt the same. So I want to hear your ideas about perceptions of value. So what I want to dive into for a minute and is talking about this. If I held $100 bill in my hand, I'm going
Mhm.
to value that $100 bill very differently than Amazon or Google will, right? It's a very different perception of value there. So when you head into your negotiations, what kind of thoughts are going into your head ahead of time and during about how the other people might be valuing some of the things that you might want from them? So, what are your kind of overall feelings about how you try to get to the bottom of learning how they value their items?
Well, I think, with anything, it's a matter of discovery and
Mm,
questions.
mm,
Um, you know, I I hate using the term hard sales.
mm,
I've never liked the term. I don't like the concept behind it. Um, to me, and again, I'm a consultant, right? I'm in consultant sales, so it
right.
is about the story. It is about the questions. You've got to ask the questions. You have to understand where your customer is coming from. If you can understand where your customer is coming from and what ultimately is important to them, right? The value, then you can learn to talk to that customer in a way that makes sense to them. And you can show your value through the lens of their value. Hard sales is when you don't understand that value. You're just browbeating someone with your value and the way that you want to share that value. And it's you might get a deal here or there, but it's through brute force. It's not efficient, it's not effective, and it's not going to give you the kind of growth that you want. But when you can sit down and truly understand where your customer's coming from, what they value, what's important to them, and you can map your value statement to their ideas of value, again, it's about that alignment. Then then they'll listen. They'll hear what you have to say. And, I've been in several negotiations where, you know, I here at Infogen Labs, we're not about nickel and diming our customers. So I do my best not to negotiate, to be quite honest. But part of that is, again, being able to align the value I'm providing to the way someone perceives the value that they're looking to receive
Mm-hmm.
or what's important to them. And I've been in several situations where we go into it already knowing that. And so
Mm-hmm.
we go into a situation where we've already put our pricing where it needs to be in order to hit the value that our customer is trying to achieve. And we'll sit down at the table and we'll explain this to them. But they look at that and they're like, yeah, but this is a negotiation. So what can you do? Can you knock off 5%? Can you knock off 10? How do you? And it's a matter of, again, understanding where they're coming from, understanding what they're trying to achieve, asking some really pointed questions that lead them down a track to understand that they've already gotten the 5%. They've already gotten the 10% discount. I'm not wasting their time. I'm not wasting my time. We already know what you want. We've already given that to you because we're not here to nickel and dime you. We're here to deliver a quality service. And that's what we're going to do. And we've priced this appropriately to do that. You're coming to us, you called us because you got a call from a friend of yours, a colleague of yours that's used us in the past. They love
Mm-hmm.
working with us. You're not happy with who you're working with now. You just told me that 2 minutes ago. Why aren't you happy? Well, and they're giving you this. That's great, but you're not happy with what you're paying for.
The call out there about the alignment, hearing about how really I mean, the only way that you get there, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, the only way that you get there to even know that what you're presenting is what the other party is looking for is you have to be in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to actually be listening and caring about what their winning statement needs to be, right? Everybody's got to leave the negotiation with a win.
Yep.
And so you can't, like you said, if you're just browbeating people with what your needs are, or, hey, my need, I need,
Yep.
you're not going to know what their needs are. And you can't get to
100%.
that point. So, have you found that to be a really effective strategy to really try? Is that how you do? You kind of put yourself in the other person's shoes and really try to get where they are to understand what they need.
Absolutely. Background, go a little bit further, we talked, out of college, I sold used cars. Before that, I was in college, right? I didn't get my degree in finance. I didn't get my degree in business. I got my degree in anthropology. What is anthropology? It's the study of people. It's the study of culture. So I bring that every day. And I get it. Everyone out there sells differently. I'm all for having some structure and repeatable results and the KPIs and the metrics and all of that. It makes sense to a degree. But at the end of the day, every single salesperson is different. Just like you mentioned, every other individual that you've had on this podcast for you has answered things in completely different ways. It's been a completely different experience for you. I get that. Sales is like that. The way I sell is through understanding. If I can understand my customer, if I can understand where they're coming from, and that's what I'm imparting to my team. That's the culture I'm building at Infogen Labs. We are 100% that cliche of customer first, and I don't care. We are 100% customer first. And you can laugh at us and you can say, oh, you're just saying that. No, it is true. We understand the customer. And if we can understand the customer, we can tailor what we're doing to drive maximum value for them. And if we can't, we'll put them in a direction and find someone for them that can through our network of partners. And that's part of it too, is being willing to admit when you can't help someone.
Mm-hmm.
And being willing to point them in the direction of someone who can.
How amazing is it in life that, by showing some kindness and respect and truly partnering with people and putting the customer first, that you actually have better results too, right? So the irony of it is that there's no argument against it. You get to be, you get to participate in humanity. You get to be a kind, empathetic person. And oh, by the way, you sell more shit than everybody else, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, how it's a win-win, everybody gets to win. I can tell by speaking with you both before and after that you're a very humble, genuine guy. And I mean that sincerely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've been doing this for quite a while. When you look at a couple of the industries that you've been in, like you pointed out, used car sales can be pretty demanding, especially I know Enterprise is world renowned for their sales training program and how it's very good, but it's very intense and it's very, very cookie cutter from what I understand. Please correct me if I'm wrong. They're training something specific. And then of course you go into staffing, which is a wild beast in my opinion. I'm saying it, not you, but have you, being that you've been in sales and negotiations for a long time, have you noticed, Andrew, call it in the last 4 or 5 years, that there has been this paradigm shift to everybody, a lot more people kind of dropping the mask a little bit and just being their authentic self, starting to value human connection
100%.
and kindness a little bit more. Have you experienced that too?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of bad that came from COVID. I was having a conversation with a colleague literally over the weekend about this.
Wow.
What you just pointed out is one of the best things in the professional business world that came out of COVID. All of those walls dropped down. I don't look at, I have customers, and now I have customer friends. And
Yeah.
that really happened because of COVID. Because during COVID, I had a 3-year-old barging in to my home office,
Yeah.
pulling on my chair, screaming and yelling because he needed a snack, and mommy was grocery shopping. So, and I'm in the middle of a high stakes, business meeting. But what's great is everyone in that business meeting was completely understanding, because the negotiation before that, one of their key executives had their
Mhm.
9-year-old come into the room throwing a complete and utter tantrum because they couldn't get their switch to work.
Mhm.
So COVID, again, did a lot of horrible things for the world at large. But I think in the business world, it has provided new insights, new opportunities, new ways of doing business. But in a personal level, it is forced walls to drop that have been institutionalized for years, and I couldn't be more happier about it. I
You
love
know,
being able to just sit down with a customer or sit down with an individual like yourself and have a real conversation. We don't need to sit and talk about, who we know and name drop. We don't
mhm.
need to, be stuffy in our business suits every day. I have one customer, I would always show up business casual. Once COVID was over, we'd meet for lunch, we'd meet for coffee. I'm showing up business casual, and he's showing up in Hawaiian shirt and shorts. And we're talking, a VP of technology. And,
Yeah.
third time we did this, he finally looked at me and he's like, Andrew, stop making me feel uncomfortable. For God's sakes, put on some shorts next time. So we just meet in t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops now, and it's the greatest thing in the world. I'm thankful he gave me that permission to just be my authentic self. So yes, I would say I have 100% seen that happen over the past, I would say, 3 years as COVID hit, and
Mm.
we've all tried to find new ways to navigate this business reality that we found ourselves in.
Yeah, I've actually had on my mind for about a week or two, and I'm going to do a LinkedIn post about it, but like something along those lines is like the negativity of COVID is obviously you can't quantify it, but in some ways it has broken humanity down to its core components.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of the masks have dropped and the BS and the whatnot. Like it's really broken us down, like what they claim, happens in the military and the police academy, which I went through. It kind of breaks you down to the point where you're just yourself, right? Like everybody's just being themselves now. And to your
yeah.
point, that is something that I think was one of the few benefits that came out of that. So you and I are in complete alignment on that. Um, you also mentioned before, talking about the aspect of fear in negotiations
Hmm.
and being comfortable, being uncomfortable. What have you seen in your career? Both, I, I
Hmm.
know you, I know you remember this one. You're the used car sales guy, and you got the guy walking in, chest puffed, and ready to just take you on instantly about why he's not going to pay more than X amount on the used car. Um, what have you seen ego do to negotiations, either in that world or in your now more corporate life or bigger dollar amounts? What do you think about ego?
um, I personally despise it.
Yeah.
So um, it's one of the things I'd like to see change in the sales industry is taking ego out of sales. It's not about who has the biggest voice and the largest stick. Again, like I said, I'm anti hard sales. It's about being a good listener.
Yeah.
It's about empathy and understanding, and it's about truly trying to help someone. And if you can accomplish that, you will have a customer for life. One thing we haven't talked about is customer acquisition cost. Previous organization I worked with, they had no concept of what that meant. Our
Mm.
CEO really truly felt that the sales team was there to plug holes in a leaky ship. That's, just bring in the new business. I don't care that we're losing business because you'll just replace it with new business. Well, how does a business grow if for every drop, of
You're losing
revenue
one.
that you bring in, you're losing a drop of revenue? Like you're just going to stagnate. You'll be where, and maybe that was it. Maybe subconsciously there was fear of success, or maybe
Mm.
subconsciously there was just this need to just be where they were and never go beyond that. But at the end of the day, with no value in customer acquisition costs, there was no way to grow. And so the best way to make the most of that customer acquisition cost is to be empathetic, to be understanding, and to be on your customer's side, because then that customer will stay. I don't track new logos as heavily as I used to. What I track is retention. Because if I can keep customers, and our retention rate here at Infogen is phenomenal because we care. And the same thing with our employees, to be quite frank. We have very low turnover with our employees as well, because I say we put customers first, and we do, but we also put our employees first as well. So it's kind of like they're kind of tied there for first place, and the company comes in its second place. And by keeping our customers happy, by keeping our employees happy, we retain both. And by retaining our employees, we retain our customers. I mean, like it's just this cycle here. But the idea is remove the ego. It's not about winning at all. It's about helping. And in order to help, you cannot go into a situation with ego. You have to go into a situation being open and willing to listen.
You know, coming from my background working in mental health, that's come pretty natural to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll share. I'm not super private about it, but I grew up in poverty, young single mom, and so that's where I was going with this question. Actually, I'm glad. So thank you. But I just wanted to ask you where, you have this sense of humanity, which I'm not going to call it rare, but I mean, I would say if I met 100 people, probably less than 15 of them seem to subscribe to that, which I do. So maybe you just answered that, but for whatever you're comfortable sharing, where does that sense of like empathy and compassion and kindness and humanity, where did that develop in you, Andrew?
I would say 100% from my upbringing, my family. I wouldn't say we grew up in poverty per se. We were lower middle class. I mean, if you were to look at where we came from in today's, economy, we probably would be, at right around there. We have a stable home environment. Both parents, to this day, still happily married most of the time, right?
Yeah.
But it really came from them and the values that they imparted on myself and my siblings. And it was this understanding that life is bigger than just you. And there are 1,000 different ways to see the world. There are 1,000 different ways to live in the world. And that needs to be, respected and accepted. And so we grew up with, thoughts of equity and inclusivity being taught to us, not just through words, but through actions with our parents. I grew up in a very affluent area, although I was not affluent myself. So I also got to see, kind of like that whole like keeping up with the Joneses as a child.
Yeah.
That was 100% me. I think some of where my drive comes from it does come from that. It's that, the friends I had were all affluent. They had the newest, back then it wasn't the newest iPhone, right? It was the newest high tops, right? The LA Gears and things like that. I'm totally dating myself at this point.
Reebok pumps, the
Reebok pumps, 100%.
Yeah.
They had the new shoes, they had the new clothes, they for lunch, I was bringing my bag lunch, they were, drive, in high school, they had a car, they could drive off property and they could, get a nice lunch at Taco Bell, right? Because, in high school, that's nice.
Burger King, yeah.
Burger King, yeah. Oh, no, In-N-Out, right? They could afford In-N-Out.
Yeah,
so that was,
right.
that was baller money right there.
Yeah.
And so, again, I wouldn't say that I was at the bottom. I was lower middle, but I definitely could see that disparity as well. It's something my wife and I talk about every day. She also came from very humble means too. The life that we have been able to provide for our children is unimaginable. I mean, honestly, I never could have imagined that I would be where I am today, and I'm just so unbelievably thankful for it. And it's because of being able to see that difference at an early age, and because I had the stability and the home life with the parents that I had, the siblings that I had, the values that were impressed upon us. All of that has come together, and that's actually a big topic of conversation again for my wife and I. Is how do we reconcile that with our children who don't know that background, who don't they don't see that difference. And so we're constantly now looking for ways to be more active in our community. Here I am, this chief revenue officer of a IT consulting firm. I'm also the PTA president at my kids' school,
Yeah.
So again, being very involved, finding ways to give back to our local community, to make a direct difference in the lives of the people that we share our world with, trying to teach our children as well through action, the same way my parents taught me. It's not just words to be equitable or to be inclusive. You have to back that up with how you live.
Well, you're 100% speaking my language there. I mean, I really, it is rare to meet again people who have that kind of mindset. So, kudos to you. I mean, not only for trying to give back some stuff to the world, but also doing it with humility, and then also keeping that a level of appreciation, right? Remembering where we came from and where we are, and just saying, thankfully that I'm here, and more importantly, nobody's taking this away from me now, right? I worked too hard to get here. It's gonna. So before I want to wrap up and hear about Infogen and what you're up to, but before we do, I want to ask you the question that I'm most excited to ask you based on your opening is, let's talk about AI. And
Absolutely.
yes, I knew that would get you fired up. With the caveat, obviously, that what you and I talk about right here at 3:55 p.m. Eastern in Boston, you're in California, it could change in 5 minutes. But with that
100%.
being said, what if any way do you see AI being a part of sales and negotiation in the future? Either things that you're currently using, things you hope exist. What are your thoughts there?
So I see, again, with anything, right? AI is going to take a lot of the minutia, the transactional kind of day to day that we all get bogged down on, and it's gonna take it off our plate, so that
Yep.
we again can start focusing on on what really matters. I know there's some tools right now that I'm signed up for betas on, leveraging conversational artificial intelligence for
Yep.
sales calls, even. I see artificial intelligence disrupting every single industry in different ways. We ourselves do a lot of work in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and so we're exploring use cases in the legal industry, and how artificial intelligence can short circuit and shortcut discovery or transcription of witness testimony or court testimony. We look at things like even within technology itself, agile methodology, scrum mastery,
Yep.
automation, and testing. These are all areas that artificial intelligence will touch. Now, I know you were talking specifically about sales, and I
No, it's
see that
good.
again. I see artificial intelligence affecting sales across the board as well. Being able to leverage conversational intelligence, right, to handle customer service issues before they escalate. And I know we've been doing this, there are companies that do this, now with bots on their website. You open up that chat window, and then once it reaches a certain level, right, it'll toss you off to that real life person. But that level is getting higher and higher before you need someone to step in, right? So I see that happening, but I also see that happening with calls, right? A lot of people say cold calling is dead. I think it's been dead for a while, and it's because humans cannot make the volume of calls necessary, because that percentage of success is so low. So are there other avenues that to drive business and opportunity through the door than cold calls that might be a little bit more effective or efficient? Yeah. But once you get a machine involved, if a machine can handle 10 calls at the same time, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter how low that percentage point is, because the volume now is 10 times larger than it ever was before. I see cold calls making a comeback, at least in some respects, leveraging artificial intelligence. I can see a use case for setting up appointments, right? So that initial pass, and then you pass it off to the real life person, your closer, they do everything else, right? Yeah, I mean, that's some of the thoughts, some of the ideas I have about artificial intelligence. I'm constantly looking for ways to work with artificial intelligence on a daily basis. I was one of the first people to adopt ChatGPT as just as a personal user back in
Yep.
November, right? End
Oh,
of
wow.
November.
Okay.
But my
Yeah.
company, we've been leveraging OpenAI's APIs and technology and solutions that we've been building for over a year now. So
Ah,
before anyone else knew what ChatGPT was in the general marketplace, we were already building solutions for it. So artificial intelligence, machine learning, I do see that as the future. I think there are going to be some amazing things that come out of it. I also think, like with anything, it's going to be a double-edged sword. There will be some pitfalls. There will be some other things that may not be as positive that come out of it. But I'm an optimist at heart, so I'd like to believe there's going to be more good than bad with what we see coming down the pipeline with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I align with that. And like everything to do with anything that humans do, is that there's always going to be some level of good and bad. But I, like you, I feel like the good will very much outweigh the bad, for sure. And a lot of those things you talked about are all things that you have a much higher level of expertise. I've seen these concepts talked about in generalities, but I am completely fascinated by the number of things that we have coming up. And you know what, Andrew? I mean, we're in August right now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this has been going on for 6 months, 7 months. I mean, can you even imagine where this is in 12 months? You know what I mean? This is going to be
amazing.
Oh, the ride is good. We're going to appreciate it. Could take it one by one. The ride is going to be amazing.
I will say this though.
Yes, sir.
People to people interaction will become more and more important.
That's it.
Because, you talked about Joe Rogan and the platform that you're using, right? For these podcasts.
Riverside.
And,
yep.
Riverside, right? Like I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and I've a friend in, technology sent this to me a while back, but there's an actual interview that takes place between Joe Rogan and Steve Jobs that never took place.
Oh,
and it's several AI platforms coming together to create this deep fake interview, if you would, this deep fake podcast.
Okay.
And as you talk about the underside of artificial intelligence, deep fake is going to become more and more and more of a thing. Well, in the world of sales, I mean, that's world destroying, right? If you think that you're talking to someone and you're setting up a deal with someone and all of a sudden it's not the person you thought that you were talking to because of artificial intelligence intervening and creating a persona that's not real or emulating a persona that is real, like these are the pitfalls of artificial intelligence in sales, which I think everyone needs to start thinking about and being aware of. But ultimately what that means is that the people-to-people interactions are going to be even more important. It's not going to be enough just to have the two of us over Riverside doing a podcast together. Eventually it's going to be in studio, more and more and more. Deals aren't going to be closed over email and DocuSign the way they were before. I mean, that'll still exist, right? But I think we're going to start going back to that handshake, that in-person handshake, so that the person that you're talking to, the person that's making a commitment to you, is an actual person that can be trusted, counted on, and relied on.
Andrew, you just actually, that's actually a really good point, which is AI may force us to have a more human experience, right? Because as this becomes the overarching theme of everything we can't see in front of us, that may now be, I can see a lot of businesses adopting that. We don't sign contracts unless they're shaking hands, right? We don't know we don't know what's a deep fake anymore.
We don't know what's on the other line.
That's a really interesting perspective. You don't know what's on the other line, on the other side of the email. And so we don't close contracts unless we shake a hand. That's a good point. That's a good point.
It's going to be great for the travel industry.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone who listened from the travel industry just went ding, but we they have algorithms that probably talked about this 5 years ago. So anyway, so let's wrap up here, and I want to hear about Infogen, and I want you, Andrew, to shamelessly tell me all of the amazing things that Infogen Labs has going on, kind of the value proposition, why people should come find you and check out your website. I'm on it right now. I'm going to be on it while we're chatting. It's corp.infogen-labs.com. Is that right?
Correct.
With that, sir, I will leave the floor to you. Let's hear what's going on over there.
Well, I'll say this. I've done my best to put a lot of that into some of my responses today. Yep. Shamelessly, I figured why wait till the end? But I would say this. At heart, Infogen Labs is an IT consulting firm. We're focused exclusively on creating software solutions to meet the new world that is literally unfolding every second around us. You know, we work on the edge. So when we're talking about things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, we have a whole division that handles augmented reality and mixed reality as well as virtual reality. And when you marriage that to artificial intelligence, there are some crazy things that are
Sure.
going on. You know, from a vertical standpoint, an industry standpoint, education is primed to see unbelievable evolution and how they engage with students, whether they're you know, preschoolers or whether they're graduate students, because of this intersection of different technological disciplines, artificial intelligence with you know, augmented reality or you know, mixed reality. Provides whole new realms of immersive training that can take place. How do I know this? Because we're doing it right now.
Wow.
Okay. So you know, if customers out there are looking to differentiate themselves by
Yeah.
taking advantage of technology that doesn't exist today, we're the partner that helps them take that vision or that idea and marriage it to the cross section of technology tools that are available or are right there on the edge and create those solutions. We're
I'm
creating new marketplaces. We're creating new revenue streams for our customer. I mean, we do the other stuff too, right? You know, you need to modernize a billing system. We'll take care of that for you, and we'll
sure.
help streamline that and save you some cost. But the stuff I get excited about is the stuff where we are literally pushing the envelope of what technology today can do, knowing that tomorrow it's going to be able to do even more. I mean, OpenAI is already talking about GPT-5
Yeah.
and that it could be released before the end of the year.
Hmm.
I mean, technology is now starting to move at such a rapid rate. You mentioned one thing earlier today, always be closing, the ABCs, right? I would like
Hmm.
to challenge everyone out there to replace that in the world of sales with ABL, always be learning. Because if you're going to sell in technology, whether you're selling a product or selling a service, if you are not consistently learning about what is happening today, you will not be relevant tomorrow. And if you're not relevant in what you can speak to, you cannot provide value to the customers that you want to reach. So always be learning. If you're always learning, the closing will come.
And so much so that, especially now, I mean, in the last 12 to 16 months, like you need to, it's happening rapidly. And
Oh,
as I
yeah.
listen to Andrew speak, you know, to our listeners, what better partner to have? I mean, I think there's a lot of people who have some level of fear, insecurity, a lot of excitement out there too, but fear and insecurity about it. Here with Andrew and his team, you know, they're on the bleeding edge. They're on the cutting edge of this. The people who are going where nobody else wants to go and
That's
braving it.
awesome.
So yeah, so like what a partner to have on all this. So Andrew, I have 100% enjoyed our time together, truly and genuinely. Do you have any thoughts to wrap us up here?
I do. There was one thing I definitely wanted to bring
Please,
up because I know this conversation was about negotiation. I talked a
please
lot about
do.
my past, a lot about my previous experience and how that's
Yeah.
kind of informed me and brought me to where I am with my understanding of negotiating and the like. But there is one other thing I didn't talk about that has transformed the way I see negotiation, and I would be doing everyone a disservice if I didn't share it with everyone.
I
I'm
want to hear it.
guessing 50% of you probably already know about this, but there's a book in the market right now written by a man by the name of Chris Voss, and it's called Never Split the Difference. If you have not read it, read it. If you've read it, put it on your list to read every single year. It has been transformative in the way that I approach negotiations from a scientific level. I think subconsciously or unconsciously, I've spent a lot of time talking about the art of negotiation. And I know at one point, you know, Matt, you had talked about kind of that difference between the art and the science.
Yep.
Never Split the Difference dives deep into that science in a way that is 100% digestible and enjoyable. So I would highly recommend Never Split the Difference if you're looking to get an edge on how you negotiate. It's a phenomenal read.
Well,
I guess that's about it.
I will add on to that, Andrew, and say that you know that book in Chris Voss comes up at least 60 or 70%.
Yeah.
But I always say the same thing. Though I'm like, hey, if somebody has any connection to anyone on Chris Voss's team, I'd love to have them on this show. So I ask everybody, just if you know anybody who might know someone on Chris Voss's team, love to get in contact and have them on the show so I can get
You and
schooled
me
even more
both.
than I do.
You and me both.
No, but that's a great call out. I mean, that book is literally such. I mean, it's the playbook. It really is the playbook. Unquestionable. I don't hear anybody critiquing it. It's true gold. True gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. No.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Great to have you on. Truly enjoyed it. Such a wealth of knowledge. Love your passion and excitement. And for our listeners, that was Infogen Labs. So Andrew, anything else?
I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time, Matt. It's been a joy speaking with you. And again, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, sir.